Speaking of speaking, I was listening to something earlier and I wanted to get your guys' opinion because I was like trying to work through it. Is the evolution of language. So one guy believes that there was a mutation at some point with humans that gave us a device to learn all of the languages, and it was like an innate ability that we were born with. And then some of the arguments against it are that we built the languages over time and it started out with gestures. I was like, I feel like those are both kind of the same thing.
I'm slightly.
Wait, so
Are you trying to comprehend it, or is that a question?
I was trying to think about it. The one guy was saying that we were complex enough that we could build the language. That's why you have different areas with different languages. And then the one guy believes that we're like born, like there was apparently like a mutation. This is what it says. Theory of language acquisition views language acquisition as a biologically determined process that uses neural circuits in the brain, which have evolved to contain linguistic signals. Requires an inborn faculty in children, a concept known as the language acquisition device. In other words, humans are born with an innate language device that enables them to learn any human language.
So it's just a matter of finding a way to activate it, kind of type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if someone says the right phrase, you're gonna know every language type of thing. Like,
I don't know.
like it's unlocked.
But I like in my head, I was thinking about it. I was like,
achievement unlocked.
Is it just saying that we have the ability to learn the language? Not that we already know the language. It's like you have the ability to learn every language possible.
Yeah, enables them to learn any human language. And then it says prior to Chomsky, who's the guy who studies it, he's a linguist, philosopher, writer, or whatever, says it was widely agreed that language was acquired through experiential learning, but his theory argues that human brain structures naturally allow for the capacity to learn and use languages. But I feel like if it's like,
I feel like that's the same thing, kind of.
Right? I feel like that would be the thing that separates you. You're born with an ability to understand gestures. That's a language, right?
but
they kind of like just are the same thing.
ASL though. So do you think maybe picking up ASL is easier than picking up like, I don't know, Portuguese? Not necessarily ASL, right? But just like sign language, because I'm sure it's different in different parts of the world.
But if you're talking about it being easier, I don't think there's probably languages that are more difficult to learn. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that you have the ability to learn all of those. And then one is saying, I think the one that I saw, the guy was talking about, it was built by humans. Humans built these languages over time.
I mean, didn't we already do that though?
By different like inflections in the voice, and it apparently started with gestures.
Isn't like Japanese like the way you can say the same phrase, but one's taken more serious by how you say it?
It's like a lot of like Japanese and Chinese is like the tonation. Like you could have like the same word, but like you could say it in a different tone and it would mean something else.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Here, let me show you some of what this guy says, because I was like, I'll speed it up though, because I was like so confused. I was like, I don't get it.
The ability to learn a language is not just like the ability to learn anything in general, or is it like the specific thing for language?
Yeah, I agree with Jake.
Like,
I mean, you have the ability,
like learning
Technology and a guest
geometry
lecturer at the University of Washington.
What determines how language in a particular country evolves? Why is French, for example, so different from German?
Well, first of all, you're assuming the French is different from German. And
the French would probably say so.
there's no simple measure of how different languages are from one another. In fact, if you look at the languages structurally, the way a linguist would look at them, French is different from the other Romance languages in a variety of ways, which make it more similar to German and other Germanic languages. There are a number of features of French which are sort of Germanic in character.
Give us some of those features.
Well, just to take a simple one, in all Romance languages, except for French, you can delete the subject of a sentence. You can say the equivalent of walks to the store, meaning he walks to the store. You can't do that in English, but you can do it in Italian or Spanish, and in fact it's common Romance, goes right back to Latin. French is the only Romance language in which you can't do that. It's like a Germanic language pretty much in that respect. There are what they call clitics, small pronouns that you attach to verbs. So you say the equivalent of I, him, saw. That's common Romance. But in the other Romance languages, you can do things like I, him, want to see. You can do that in all, me, I want to see him, but not in French. And
does that make any sense to you guys?
No.
Like, are these guys just next level thinkers or
I'm probably
something?
gonna have to run it back like after the podcast.
Like,
I just
They probably just have like that knowledge of the language already, so they know what they're talking about.
and they're also like teaching at like universities of Washington and Massachusetts and shit like that. So
like,
It's like
There are some French theorists, for
it's like
example,
them wanting
who argue
us to pick up on like the way they're talking about it. I'm like, dude,
but also
I
like
think he's just saying that there's generalizations in the Romance languages that are the same and then are different. Like France has differences, so it's more like German.
One thing that he brings up that we kind of talked about, I think with Eddie was talking about like in Mexico when you speak Spanish, like in comparison to Spain, right? There's different, like you're gonna have different ways. What do they say? Some like Mexico's like the trash Spanish or something like that.
so onion, cebolla, and they'd be like cebolla.
But he talks about it like language being a national thing, like in the United States where it's English. He says that's more of a modern thing that you said didn't exist back in
There are
the
some
day.
French theorists, for example, who argue that they must work very hard to keep the French language pure. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean anything. I mean, there's an old, virtually every national language, every national culture, or at least the European ones, maybe others, has a mythology that's the only real pure language, and all the others are corrupt. In France, this position is kind of extreme. In fact, if you go back to its origins, it's even a little bit comical. I don't know if anybody's actually studied it, but if you go back
Comical?
to the
This guy's
18th
straight
century, you
dissing
would
him
say
right now.
Diderot.
Well, that's the
he
thing, though. This is
explained-
just his opinion. I think a lot of, I'm gonna be honest, man. I think not a lot, but there's a decent amount where like they're just preaching their ideologies, and because they teach at colleges, you know, you can sign up for freaking psychology 101, and this guy's like, all right, today we're gonna talk about how Japanese was the mother of all languages, and Chinese is garbage language. You know,
Like you find something that you're interested in, and since you've gone through school, like you have the credentials to teach that thing. That's kind of like in Oppenheimer, right? Like he was a genius in that field, and he was like, I'm just going to start teaching the way that I do, the way that I believe it. But I guess they kind of operate more off of facts and science. So it's a little bit
because you can't disprove like numbers. Like if your formula is right, like how can you could try to disprove it, right? But if you can't, you can't. And it's very factual, right? It's very like, I'm right, you're wrong. But for someone to just outright say like, this is the mother language and all these other languages are trash, and they teach like psychology, right? That's crazy.
I don't know what you're talking about in teaching psychology.
That was the point, is just how ridiculous some of these professors can be. They're just going off of like ideologies that they want to express and things like that.
But you can't say that it's like, I think I agree with him in the way saying that it's like you can't have a pure language because language changes. Like even if you think about when new things are invented, like the internet, like that becomes then a new word, a new thing of language. That
Well, like they're already based off of other parts of other languages, right? Like French stems from wherever it stems from, which probably has like is the base of other languages too.
It's like a conglomeration of a bunch of different stuff, and as people go to different places, they interact with people who communicate in different ways, and then it like blends.
It
Yes,
just kind of
Spanglish.
all gets mixed up. And it's just like, if you think about those people who find like new breeds of animals or types of insects, or you know how sometimes they'll name specific species of animals, right? And they'll name them after like themselves occasionally.
Name one.
Yeah.
It's there. I couldn't name
Blue
one
beetle.
for you, but it happens.
Yeah, come on, Eddie, tell us.
I'm sure there are
Inform
plenty,
us.
bro. I'm sure there's a George beetle out there or something, right? 'Cause some guy
Lies.
named George.
The
found
Eddie,
it,
the
right?
Eddie Suarez stink
Effect.
bug.
But the stink bug. But my point is, right, is like they're making that up, you know, but I don't know. I think with language, right, it's going to constantly, I mean, we have an urban dictionary for crying out loud.
But also, like, you're gonna dedicate your whole life to try and like understand the evolution of language. Do you think you'll ever actually know the answer?
No.
There's no way.
Just like anything else you dedicate your life to, you'll never truly understand that.
I feel like
Regardless.
language is where does it begin? You can't go like it's so hard to trace.